All right, well, hello everyone, and thank you very much for joining me for this talk at the first ever virtual edition of the Other Art Fair Sydney. My name is Bethany, and I'm a curator at Saatchi Art. Today, I'll be telling you a little bit about our platform, highlighting a few noteworthy artists who are on exhibition at the Other Art Fair, and sharing our insights about investing in art in general, including things to look out for whether you're purchasing art from an emerging artist through a gallery, fair, or online. Many of these tips actually come straight from our chief curator, Rebecca Wilson, who I've trained with on the art advisory team at Saatchi Art, and who established our online platform with the mission of discovering and empowering emerging artists and connecting them with collectors around the globe. So at Saatchi Art, I assist in selecting artists for our Rising Stars report, which is an annual report on young artists on the rise and recent graduates from top BFA and MFA programs. I also select the artists for feature in our One to Watch interviews, as well as our 21 artists to watch in 2021 report. I certainly recommend checking out all of these resources if you're looking to build a collection of noteworthy artists, but are maybe unsure about where to begin. Of course, you're already at the virtual edition of the Sydney Fair, which is also an excellent place to start. But before you embark on your own tour of these artist booths, or explore online or go visit brick and mortar galleries as those begin reopening, I'm here to share some tips on choosing the right works for your personal collection. So in case it wasn't a given, seeing as how we're gathered virtually, even for this talk, the amount of artworks available online has proliferated in recent years, which is exciting since it makes the art market more accessible for artists and collectors alike, but also maybe a bit daunting since as a collector, you now have quite a few options at your fingertips. So once you've established where to look for these artists, such as at this very fair, at degree shows, galleries, or on a platform like Saatchi Art, you're tasked with narrowing down your selection, which is where evaluating artworks comes in. So the first step to building a collection and choosing works is definitely to spend some time exploring, ideally with an open mind, to begin to ascertain what you like or dislike. This part might be easy, just listen to your gut and go with the works that you're drawn towards. But from there, we find that it's useful to ask evaluative questions. You can ask yourself why you like an artwork. It might be the emotions that it stirs, satisfying combination and use of formal elements, or it could be that the artist is manipulating materials or subject matters in ways that you've never seen before. From there, you might then delve into the background behind the work's creation. Ask why the artist made that work in that particular way, what inspired them, and what is it about their background that led them to creating the specific work that you're looking at today. From there, it can also be enlightening to explore an artist's entire portfolio. This can help you understand the evolution of their practice. It's a great sign to see an artist experimenting, pushing the boundaries of their practice, and challenging themselves to grow as an artist. This also situates the particular artwork that you're considering within their greater body of work, and that can make the artwork even more meaningful for you. From there, you might also examine the execution process and physicality of an artwork. This can give more insight into the artist's capability as a craftsperson, and you might discover more about how the physical properties of a work tie in with the conceptual components. I don't think that viewing artworks online, as we're doing right now, inhibits this process at all, since we do have the capability to zoom in, and you can always ask the artist questions. And of course, if you're looking to purchase through Saatchi Art, we on the curatorial team are always happy to reach out to artists and clarify any information for you. So once you've established that you're drawn to a work, either aesthetically or conceptually, you might look into an artist's professional background, where they trained or studied, where they've exhibited their work, any awards, press coverage, or recognition they've received, residencies they've completed, potentially even notable private, public, or corporate collections in which their artwork is held. So all of these components factor into both the price that you see on the artwork today, as well as the artist's potential for growth. So of course, though, many notable artists, both in art history and among the artists that Saatchi Art and the Other Art Fair represent today, are actually self-taught or are perhaps developing their careers later in life. And these are both approaches that definitely shouldn't be dismissed in the eye of a collector, since self-teaching or switching gears late in life does take incredible drive and vision. So you might want to keep an eye on these artist practices as well and see where their career goes. But on the other hand, we do still think it's worth checking out BFA and MFA degree shows. This is a great way to discover new trends, the cultural issues that artists are addressing today, and how they're responding to traditions in their own practice and to art history and the constraints of the art historical canon. So this can be a great way to check the pulse, so to speak, and to intuit where the art world might be headed with these young artists emerging from these programs. So after you've evaluated an artwork, looked into its production process, the conceptual meaning behind it, and an artist's CV, you might just decide that you loved a piece, end of story. And of course, that's an acceptable approach to purchasing an artwork too, since after all, there are no guarantees when it comes to investing in art. So your top priority should always be to purchase a work that you love and that you can imagine yourself happily living with for some time. So I actually do have a few more tips to share on building a collection and sussing out artworks, but first I would actually love to introduce you to some noteworthy artists who are exhibiting at the Other Art Fair Sydney that have caught the eye of myself and my curatorial team at Saatchi Art. I'll be walking you through what makes their work stand out and why you as a collector might want to consider their work. And this is actually quite a diverse and exciting group with very distinct practices. So all in all, I hope that your takeaway is that collecting is intensely personal and you can cater the process to your own taste and hopefully go into art buying with confidence after this talk. Okay, so this is a work by the first artist that I'd like to highlight, Anna Korean Halusin, an oil painter based in Sydney, where she relocated from her native South Africa in 2019. Anna Korean says that she, quote, observes the physical and emotional space around individuals and aims to distill the space in her work. And in my opinion, she does quite expertly blur realism and abstraction to represent this sort of liminal space where emotions, dreams, and memories all live. And I find that the delicate tones that she uses are so unique to her. And there's clearly strong draftsmanship and understanding of form and anatomy underlying her work. This is definitely an important component to consider as well when you're looking at an artwork, and that is how the elements before you are unique to that individual artist. For instance, when you see a Van Gogh, you know from the colors and brushstrokes that it's a Van Gogh. And I think that when you see these delicate tones and hazy lighting and these ghostly figures that still maintain some solidity, you know that you're looking at Anna's work. So Anna works in series, and her work is very much autobiographical and informed by the events of the present day. This work, for instance, was inspired by the devastating bushfires recently in Australia. And she also draws on the uncertainty brought on by the pandemic, and more generally has these figurative works that speak to times of transitions. I find that her figures convey this quiet stoicism floating through unfamiliar situations, and given how her works sort of merge these interior and exterior spaces, these memories and dreams to create these unstable environments, I think that they do exude a sense of calmness in the face of uncertainty and can actually be quite peaceful as a result. And actually, because Anna Korean has sold more work than anticipated at the Other Art Fair this week, and her inventory is running low, just a few days ago, she decided to release some new works that she's been experimenting with. This painting in front of us is from that new body of works, and that body of work meditates on the genre of history painting. That's a term that was coined in the 17th century and refers to paintings based on classical mythology, biblical scenes, and significant historical events. So with this series, Anna Korean is exploring how history painting was traditionally used propagandistically or didactically, and she's using the genre to portray more pluralistic and nuanced experiences that speak to contemporary life. So you'll see that she still has these ghostly figures in ambiguous settings, and suggesting that we have a few scenes occurring at once, or that are maybe open to different interpretations. And the title and the mask that this figure wears gestures towards disease, and perhaps indicates that the subject here is timely to the present day. And Anna's also interested in the idea of history repeating itself, and is thus conflating a historical genre and style with issues of the present. And her subjects and color palettes with these works are definitely a bit bolder, so it will be interesting to witness how her practice evolves with these. Anna Karian earned her BFA in South Africa, and she has exhibited internationally. Just a few years ago, she actually completed an artist residency at Otis College in Los Angeles. I'm actually joining you all from Los Angeles right now. And so I highly encourage you all to explore and spend time with Anna Karian's work, and you might notice some new things that I haven't. So our next artist is Tian Li. She's a Chinese-Australian artist who works across mediums, from small-scale paper cutouts, painting and drawings, to immersive installations and sculptures. As you might guess from this image, Tian Li is very interested in exploring light versus shadow and the symbolic meanings behind these properties. So the work that you see here, I Dance With You, is an installation combining large-scale paper cutouts, light source, and their shadows. These represent Kirin wings, and Kirin being a mythical creature from East Asian mythology that's part phoenix, part dragon, and as such represents yin and yang. It's an auspicious creature representing prosperity, but even though it's a powerful creature, it's also gentle. So I quite like this work, and I might ask why. It's quite physically impressive, as you can tell, and awe-inspiring. It definitely draws you in. But then when I delve into the subject matter and delve into Tian Li's artist statement behind this work, I discover that I'm actually drawn to it because she manages to convey these really complex concepts through elegant shapes and thoughtful physical elements. Light and dark representing yin and yang, the physical lightness of the paper representing the gentleness of this creature, and then the sheer size conveying its majesty. And additionally, the paper cutouts themselves actually are quite intricate and contain nature scenes and mythology scenes from Chinese texts. So all in all, I think this is a great inroad into Chinese mythology, and I think it's definitely indicative of a strong practice when an artist can make something educational and visually striking, where all of the visual elements are necessary and sufficient to convey a message. And this installation here was actually created for the 2018 exhibition Reflections of Asia at the Powerhouse Museum of Sydney, where it was displayed alongside works by Ai Weiwei. And that museum also holds some works by Tian Li in its permanent collection. And on a much smaller scale, Tian Li's 8 Treasures Mask series, it utilizes the same paper cutting techniques that we saw previously. These masks are made of rice paper, hand cut and sewn together. And the name 8 Treasures refers to a ceremonial Chinese dish containing 8 ingredients, which according to Chinese medicine, serve to clear your airways and bolster your immune system. And this work was created last year during a time when the face mask took on a new, quite dramatic and universal meaning in light of COVID. I think we can all agree. And specifically, Tian Li was inspired to make this while her children were away at school in the UK. So they were separated and unable to travel. So she made these masks as symbolic objects that represent both nostalgia for home and comfort food and protection and good health. So fundamentally, a strong element in Tian Li's practice is her use of a traditional, time-honored, quote-unquote, folk art technique that is of particular meaning to her. And she takes that and she develops her own style with it and uses it to make modern pieces that speak to complex issues of the present day. And so you'll see that she also creates two-dimensional cutouts. This series that we're looking at here, this particular work is about 1 meter by 1 meter. And it's based on fruit, this current series. And her goal here is just for us to consider our cultural relationship with food, much like the masks, with each work in the series representing a different fruit and its symbolic meaning. So Tian Li actually studied at the Central Academy of Fine Arts in Beijing, which is definitely a strong school to look out for if you're looking for degree shows. And from there, she earned her MFA and her PhD from the Sydney College of Arts. She's exhibited her work widely, so it's definitely an honor to have her at the other art fair. So on quite a different note, we have Dan Withy. Dan Withy is a painter born in Birmingham, England, who immigrated to Australia when he was 19 and now works in Adelaide. Dan studied illustration at the University of South Australia and now works primarily in acrylic, but I think that you can tell that his training in illustration underpins his work as they are quite graphic and linear pieces. So Dan's work, I and many others would describe it as unpretentious, and he has this art for everybody attitude that he goes about his practice with. And personally, I think that you can look at Dan's work and appreciate it like you would appreciate watching a good, comforting cartoon. And there's really no reason not to. He considers fun to be one of the most important elements of his practice. And he uses humor to deal with uncertainty and some of the more mordant elements of modern life. In many of Dan's works, we see the figure of a man caught in these bizarre, surrealist scenarios. And you get the sense that this is a figure who's a bit done in by societal expectations or toxic masculinity or just societal nonsense, not unlike an Alice in Wonderland type figure. And Dan, I find, is very intentional about the symbolism that he uses in his works. I don't want to give too much away, but this particular piece, Holding On to the Intangible, explores how we connect to each other in light of modern technology and the sense of isolation and uncertainty that this technology often yields, I think, as we experienced in the past year. The main figure here is gripping a rainbow, which is a real yet intangible object that represents hope. And he's sort of navigating this surrealist landscape that has multiple competing horizon lines and various portals. So definitely this is an interesting work to check out if you want to view it on Saatchi Art and read through Dan's artist statement. And he also has some simpler compositions where the narrative may be more up to you, the viewer, to decide or to speculate on. In any case, though, even if you can't get with the narrative, you can definitely relate to the moods that his figures convey and sort of laugh alongside them. So Dan's he's represented by and has had numerous solo shows in brick and mortar galleries throughout Australia, as well as in Berlin. So he's definitely one to keep an eye out for, particularly if you're looking to add some levity to your art collection. We at Saatchi Art definitely don't think that art needs to be austere, not always. So continuing with the levity, we have Marissa Mu. She's an artist based in Melbourne whose entire practice is really pleasant. It's centered around celebrating womanhood, body positivity, and the LGBTQIA community. She does these delicate and playful watercolor paintings that vary quite drastically in size. This one that we're looking at is about 70 inches wide, I think. And if you ask Marissa to describe her subjects, she'll say it's, quote, thousands of tiny naked women dancing. And what's distinct about Marissa's characters is the non-sexualized and non-objectified way in which they're presented. Instead, Marissa emphasizes the body as something that's active and energetic here. And she presents women who are so often presented as objects, she presents them as agents who are moving freely and confidently through this open space. So again, your collection doesn't need to be austere at all. I find that Marissa's practice is very straightforward and accessible and inherently positive, but that doesn't mean it's simplistic, however. Marissa's developed a signature figurative style such that when you see her work, you know that you're looking at a Marissa Mu. And she uses that style to elevate figures and perspectives that have historically been quite underrepresented or left out of the cultural conversation. So her works are a great mirror onto the visual culture of our day, and I think they speak very strongly and positively about where we are socially and where we can go. So Marissa's parents actually immigrated to Australia from East Timor, and Marissa identifies as a queer woman. So there is the imperative to represent diverse bodies, skin tones, and identities in her work comes from a personal place as well. mrsa has been quite active in recent years. In 2019, she was winner of the Emerging Artist of the Year award granted by the Melbourne Gallery 45 downstairs. In the past few years, she's also frequently exhibited with the Other Art Fair across our Brooklyn, Los Angeles fairs, and here in Australia. And these works are on paper in a variety of sizes, like I said, so I think you can certainly make these work in a variety of collections. All right, so this last artist that we're going to discuss, you might find a bit more of a challenge, which is one of the reasons why I love his work. Morgan Stokes is a Sydney-based artist who presently divides his work into pre-COVID and post-COVID. As an aside, you've probably noticed by now that COVID has been a defining experience and subject for many of these artists, and it's amazing to see how differently they all approach it. So Morgan's pre-COVID works are actually somewhat colorful and figurative, contrasting what we see here today, but his post-COVID works, it's actually an interesting conceptual meaning behind this piece. His post-COVID works that we're looking at here ruminate on how suddenly and dramatically our world shifted from, in our day-to-day lives, shifted from physical space and gatherings to the digital realm. Specifically with this new body of works, he claims that amid this saturation of screens and images, that images have actually become mundane. The virtual gaze is his term for how our perception of images is evolving in light of technology to the point that we're so oversaturated with them that we fail to appreciate images at all. So whether or not you agree with this sentiment, it's definitely nice to rest your eyes, and it can be an aesthetic challenge and kind of a mental exercise to look at this work. So here, instead of using a canvas as a space to create an illusion or a representation of another image, Morgan examines the physical properties of painting itself, the canvas, the wood support, and the physical nature of paint. And of these works, Morgan says he sees them as quite, quote, cynical, self-conscious, and honest paintings. I think self-conscious, meaning self-conscious of their futility as painting objects in physical space that will inevitably be swept up and digitized, admittedly, like how we are viewing and discussing them now. Of course, it is a bit ironic that we're viewing and discussing these works that are all about physicality through a screen, but I think that lifespan of the paintings as physical objects is something that Morgan is taking into account and wants us to realize as viewers as we're processing these works, knowing that ultimately they will primarily be viewed and shared online and through a screen. So personally, I find this work exciting, actually, because there's a historical precedent for this kind of work. In post-minimalism, a movement and a kind of type of practice in which artists began exploring the materiality of art itself, materiality of canvas, of metal, and of paint and wood as raw materials rather than tools to illusionistically portray something else. That movement emerged in the 60s, so it's interesting to see a resurgence of these techniques in a very different technological and social environment. So I find that Morgan's works, in fact, take on their own distinct meaning in light of our historical moment, COVID namely. So like post-minimalism, Morgan does show some evidence of human hand and touch and imperfections and irregularities in his work with stains and irregular stitching or random paint drips. And these are conscious elements, actually, that amplify these objects as physical objects, not images that are easily transferable to a screen. And as physical objects, they spur you to slow down and to take in the often behind the scenes elements of paintings, and in a way sort of empathize with these objects as things that have been eclipsed by the digital world. I know that if you're feeling anything like me, you might be a little overwhelmed by being reduced to a square on Zoom. And like I said in our intro, it's a great sign when an artist is experimenting and trying something new. This is quite a drastic and bold move for Morgan. He set up a kind of constraint for himself by rejecting figurative work or representation, or even creating abstracts. So it'll be exciting to follow his career and see how far he can push this concept and see what evolves from it. So that actually wraps up our artist highlights. And my hope with reviewing these works is that it gives you some insights into the things that we as curators look for when making sense of an artwork and determining its significance. And again, these are just a few of the notable artists that are on display here at Sydney. So I do hope that you can take these methods, take these questions, and go explore artist booths on your own. So again, the best advice when it comes to acquiring art is to buy what you love. And this applies whether you're deciding to buy one piece for a specific place in your home, over your couch, or if you're looking to build a collection of notable works. And I do have a few more pointers on how you can go about building a collection before we open up for questions. So if you're just starting out, for instance, I definitely want to suggest the limited edition prints as a great gateway, as a great first step into collecting, as limited edition prints are often at a more accessible price point. I myself am a young collector, you might consider, so this is something that I'm trying to do myself. And prints can also be more physically manageable than, say, paintings or sculptures. The care might be a bit easier. And just because a limited edition might exist in more than an edition of one doesn't mean they don't have a chance of going up in value. Limited editions are considered originals, and there are many modern artists whose limited editions are now highly sought after at auction. And another approach is to perhaps focus on one medium of art or one subject that you perhaps find exciting. For instance, Elton John, he's actually quite known for his photography collection, or Peggy Guggenheim, who collected and focused on abstract and surrealist painting and sculpture, or Cornelius Vanderbilt, who built a collection of over 600 drawings, which he then donated to the Met. But of course, you don't have to be a Vanderbilt or a Guggenheim to collect art. Our chief curator loves to share this story, and I think it's a great illustration. You might approach art collecting like Herbert and Dorothy Vogel, a couple that has been described as proletarian art collectors. Dorothy and Herbert were a working class couple living in New York in the 1960s who loved art and had two rules for collecting. First, they had to love the art personally and connect with it on a personal level, regardless of what a critic or a gallerist might have been recommending. And then secondly, the work had to be physically small enough for them to carry it home by themselves. And the Vogels ended up with a collection of over 4,000 works by prominent artists such as Lichtenstein, Donald Judd, and Chuck Close. And then in 1982, they donated their collection to the National Gallery of Art in DC. But you don't even need to live in an arts hub like the Vogels did living in New York. You don't even need to live in an arts hub to get in on collecting exciting new art today. The internet has made art buying a far more accessible and transparent process wherever you are, and you might take advantage of a platform like Saatchi Art and the other art fair to help you build your collection. On Saatchi Art, we actually offer a free art advisory service that you can access on our website to be connected with a personal advisor. You can send them a message. They can help you find works according to your preferences and parameters. And here at the other art fair, you have the ability to set up a time to video chat with an artist directly or send them an email if you have questions or want to learn more about their practice. So yeah, it's an exciting and crucial time to support emerging artists on the heels of such a challenging year. And we're very happy to help you on your journey as a collector. That concludes my portion of the talk. I don't know if anyone has questions that they might want to drop in. We have this chat or Q&A, so you can leave them here. Okay, and I do want to mention too, I didn't cover this painting or this painter in our talk, but I definitely want to give a shout out to Sarah Roberts. She's the figurative painter behind this background image that I use on the slide, and she's exhibiting at Sydney, so definitely check out her work. We work with her frequently. She's a very strong painter as well. And I also want to mention again before we close that you might have noticed that a common thread among these artists, all of whom are widely exhibited and celebrated, is that they approach their work very strategically and intentionally. So this manifests in disparate practices, and it can also mean drastic changes between their art last year versus this year. But I think that intentionality and how they're thinking about their work is one of the strongest foundations to a promising practice, and definitely something to look out for when you're following an artist's career. So thank you very much for joining. I hope that this was useful, and definitely feel free to reach out to us at Saatchi Art if you have any questions, and enjoy the fair. Thank you very much.